First-class restroom is for adults only, Amelia said, her tone polite but ice-cold. Lila's eyes went wide. But we're in first class, she protested, her voice trembling. It was a simple question, until it wasn't. 10 minutes earlier, Cameron Carter had slid into the plush black leather seat of the Falcon XR8, stretching out on behalf of his 10-year-old twin daughters, Lila and Kiana. As CEO of Zenith AI, a cutting-edge startup valued at $5 billion, 0 cents, Cameron was no stranger to major stakes. Today, he was escorting his girls from San Francisco to Seattle on a private charter, an environment designed to feel bulletproof, but in that moment, nothing felt safe. He watched, heart pounding, as his daughters looked at one another in confusion. Lila's braids bounced as she shook her head. Kiana's lower lip quivered. Their embarrassment rippled through the cabin like a shockwave. Cameron's mind raced, but his face remained calm. He stood, smoothing his navy jacket, and approached Amelia. The rest of the tiny 6-seat cabin was silent. Even the hum of the engines felt distant. "I'm Cameron Carter," he said quietly. "My daughters have every right to use that restroom." Amelia hesitated, eyes flicking to the closed cockpit door. Then she slid her hand off the latch with a stiff, professional nod. The door clicked open. "Thank you," Cameron said, voice low. No further issues. He returned to his seat, stomach knotting as he watched his girls file in. Lila squeezed Kiana's hand tightly. Maya, Cameron's wife, gave him a look that asked 1,000 questions. What now? He glanced down at his phone. A text from Jordan, his COO. "Final IPO deck looks great. San Jose Roadshow tomorrow." He slid the phone back into his pocket. That world suddenly felt miles away. When his daughters re-emerged a moment later, they wore expressions of both relief and quiet anger. Cameron stood once more, meeting their eyes. The rest of the cabin watched. He cleared his throat. "Ladies," he began, voice steady, "if you ever question my daughter's status on this jet again, I'll make sure every regulator from the FAA to the SEC knows who you are." There it was, the unspoken power behind the warning. In under 30 seconds, Cameron had signaled that this wasn't just a family matter. It was a declaration. He would not tolerate injustice. Not here, not ever. He guided Lila and Kiana back to their seats and sat down. His heart still thumped, but the anger had shifted into something colder, a determination. He loved these girls more than anything, and he would prove that the world could bend to justice when they demanded it. Above them, the jet's exterior cut through the sky at 30,000 feet. Inside, a reckoning had already begun, and in 10 minutes, Cameron Carter would make a single call that would ground a $1 billion 0 cents IPO roadshow, showing an entire industry that no one gets to decide who belongs in first class. The moment the restroom door clicked shut behind Lila and Kiana, a fragile calm settled over the Falcon XR8's VIP cabin. Cameron Carter sank back into his seat, forcing himself to breathe evenly. The golden morning light slanted across the walnut paneling, casting long shadows that seemed to thicken the air. Beside him, Maya reached for his hand, her fingers warm and steady, but her eyes remained on their daughters, still inside that tiny white cubicle. For a heartbeat, it felt as if everyone on the plane had chosen quiet complicity. No other passenger spoke. Amelia, the flight attendant whose name he'd caught earlier, hovered at the front of the aisle as if waiting for orders. Even the cockpit door, a silent barrier to authority, felt like part of the tension. 2 minutes passed. 3. Then a second incident shattered the plateau of silence. Kiana, her resolve stealing in that tiny space, emerged first. She unlatched the door and stepped out, only to find Amelia standing directly in her path. "I'm sorry," Amelia said, voice unchanged. "I need to check that only adult passengers use this lavatory." Kiana's shoulders stiffened. She pointed to her boarding pass, calmly held between thumb and forefinger. "Seat 1C, she said, voice low but firm. "I'm an adult passenger on this jet." Maya rose instantly, placing herself beside her daughter. "That's not acceptable," she said, tone clipped. "My children have every right." But Amelia held up a single finger. "Ma'am, company policy." "Policy," Cameron cut in, standing fully now, every inch the CEO he was. But his tone was quieter, more measured than a shout. "We chartered this plane. There is no policy that says my daughters can't use their own restrooms." Amelia's expression flickered. Just for an instant, Cameron saw the tight line of her lips, the slight raise of one brow, then it settled back into composure. "I understand," she said, nodding once, as if they'd reached some private agreement. "Please, let me escort you both to the staff lavatory." Kiana's eyes flashed. "That's not the point," she replied. "I want to use the first-class restroom, like any other passenger." Amelia glanced at Cameron, seeking solidarity, something in his body language, to tell her she could stand firm. Cameron's heart hammered. He wanted to roar across the cabin, to call down the pilot, to shame Amelia into immediate apology, but he halted himself. Calm was his ally, anger his enemy. "Escort them," he said quietly, "but I expect this to be the last time." Amelia stepped aside, allowing Kiana to pass. She brushed past Maya with forced politeness. Kiana's face was pale, but her spine was straight as she disappeared into the bathroom again. The click of the latch sounded louder this time, an echo of injustice that reverberated through the cabin. When Lila re-emerged seconds later, she wore the same determined look. She didn't break her stride as she took her seat, nor did she glance at the flight attendant. Instead, she met Cameron's gaze, and for a moment, he saw pure resilience. These girls were more than children. They were embodiments of pride that refused to be diminished. Cameron sat, his mind racing. He felt that old business instinct kicking in, analyzing, planning, calculating. But this wasn't a boardroom presentation. The stakes were different. His daughter's dignity was on the line. He tracked Amelia as she retreated to the galley, where she leaned in close to a uniformed co-worker. Their heads bent together in whispered conversation. Cameron strung those moments together. Denial, forced detour, secret whisperings. It was a pattern, not a one-time lapse. He rose again, this time leaning casually against the armrest as Amelia returned to deliver bottled water to a nearby seat. Her professional mask slipped for a microsecond, just enough that Cameron caught the glint of something unsympathetic. He guessed it was contempt. He'd seen it before in boardrooms, legal depositions, and courtroom cross-examinations. He'd even seen it in his own reflection when he'd been underestimated by older executives. Now it stared him down in uniform. Instead of confronting her directly, because confrontation at 30,000 feet was theater, not justice, he tapped his smartwatch. A line of text popped up. "Jordan, need SEC report template, ASAP." He paused, finger hovering just above send, his thumb pressed down. In one silent act, he activated the first domino. The data stream would carry every complaint he logged in the next hour straight to regulators and investors. Maya felt the buzz under Cameron's wrist. She looked at him, confusion etched on her face. He caught her gaze and gave a single nod. Everything had changed. It wasn't only about their charter flight. It was about every passenger who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Amelia returned, placing a glass on the side table near Cameron. He picked it up, letting the condensation drip onto his cuff. Then he set it back, smile polite but cold. The cabin remained silent except for the hum of the engines and the distant click of seatbelt signs flashing on and off. The tension was thick enough to taste. Behind him, Lila leaned toward Kiana, whispering something too soft for anyone else to hear, but Cameron saw Kiana nod, her lips pressed into a grim line. They were learning, and their lesson echoed painfully in Cameron's heart. He'd protected his IPO deck all week, refining slide after slide, projecting growth charts to trillions. But this lesson was real and brutal. It demanded more than a pitch deck. It demanded action. He turned back to the aisle, chin tilted up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice low enough not to disturb the other passengers, "I apologize for the disruption. If you need anything further, please let me know directly." He gave Amelia a single look, clear as any order. The next time she hesitated, the next moment of microaggression, it wouldn't be handled here. It would be handled in public filings, regulatory briefs, and the headlines of tomorrow's financial news. Amelia dropped her eyes, her posture stiffening. The rest of the cabin felt the shift. They'd witnessed the beginnings of a reckoning. Cameron slid back into his seat, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't caused a scene, but he'd made his point. His daughters slid into their seats, and Cameron wrapped a hand around each of their shoulders. Little solid weights of girl power. The twin act was simple, but seismic. They didn't belong to any map of limitation, not today, not ever. As the jet continued slicing through blue sky, Cameron's thoughts turned to the roadshow. It could wait a few minutes. Because some confrontations were too immediate to delay. And today, justice demanded an immediacy no investor deck could match. Cameron Carter settled back into his seat, the soft hum of the Falcon XR8's engines a background lull. He glanced sideways at his daughters, Lila and Kiana, their small frames still tucked into the luxurious black leather chairs. Their brows were furrowed, eyes flicking nervously toward Amelia, the flight attendant, who had just twice refused them access to the first-class lavatory. Maya Carter, seated beside Cameron, laid a gentle hand over his. She squeezed once, and he understood. A silent plea for him to move, but to do so with control. Cameron inhaled deeply, feeling the tension in his chest shift. The anger and embarrassment swirling in his daughter's eyes were more potent motivators than any boardroom challenge he'd ever faced. He stood, smoothing his navy suit jacket, and took 2 measured steps into the aisle. Every eye in the 6-seat cabin turned. The businessman in 1D paused his magazine. The woman in 2A set down her tablet. Even the cockpit door. The only point of unyielding authority felt lower, somehow, as if the cabin itself recognized a change in tone. Cameron kept his voice calm, his words deliberate. "Excuse me, Amelia," he began. His daughter Lila's eyes widened, as if she'd forgotten he was the one speaking. "My daughters are charter passengers on this jet. They have every right to use the first-class restroom." Amelia's posture shifted, a flicker of surprise, then a polite nod. She reached up and released the latch. The lavatory door clicked open once more. "Thank you," Cameron said, keeping his voice even. "That's all I need." He stepped aside gracefully, and Maya escorted Lila and Kiana back to their seats, each embraced in a quiet moment of solidarity. Mother, father, daughters, a single unit restored. But in Cameron's mind, this was only round 1. He returned to his seat as though nothing had happened, but his pulse was racing. He laid one hand on the armrest and folded it over the other, a posture of calm strength. Maya exhaled beside him, a soft relief that carried relief and gratitude. Leela leaned in, whispering to her sister, "He's like a lion." Kiana nodded, eyes bright with pride. Cameron caught that glance and offered a subtle nod of reassurance. He recognized that look. It was the same expression he saw in investors when he closed a major funding round. Only now it was his children who were investing their trust. The rest of the cabin had resumed its quiet rhythm, but something had shifted. A weight had been lifted from Lila's shoulders, and Kiana's stance was more confident. In that moment, Cameron felt both protector and strategist, a dual role he'd played often in business but never so personally. Amelia returned to collecting glasses near the galley, but her demeanor had altered. The rigid professionalism softened to something tentative, as if she'd realized these were not ordinary passengers. Cameron watched her exchange a brief word with her colleague, Marcus Chen, another flight attendant who'd shown warmth earlier. Marcus gave Amelia a sympathetic nod, then stepped away. Cameron picked up his phone, the screen lighting up with a notification from Jordan, his COO. IPO deck approved. Final rehearsal starts at 4 o'clock. He slid the phone back into his pocket. That news, once the most urgent item on his agenda, now felt secondary. He turned his attention outward, studying the cabin one more time. The walnut paneling, the plush carpeting, the soft overhead lights, all spoke of comfort and privilege. Yet none of that mattered if those privileges were arbitrarily withheld from his daughters. At that instant, he realized the true measure of first class wasn't the seat or the amenities, but the dignity extended to every passenger. Across the aisle, the businessman in 1D reached for a glass of sparkling water. He caught Cameron's eye and offered a small, encouraging smile. Cameron returned it, grateful for an unexpected ally. After a moment, he enclosed his hands and leaned back, every bit the composed executive. Yet in his mind, plans were already forming. By the time the seatbelt sign flickered on, signaling the jet's initial descent toward Seattle, Cameron was ready for round 2. His daughters had reclaimed their basic rights. Now, he would reclaim his own peace of mind and make sure this injustice never happened again. He leaned into Maya, voice low but certain. They won't think twice next time. Maya's relief turned to quiet confidence. They'll know better than to try. Cameron nodded. Exactly. The jet angled its descent, clouds parting like curtains revealing a new stage. Below them lay the Pacific Northwest's patchwork of evergreen forests and crystalline waters, but Cameron's focus was fixed inward, to the storm he'd calmed, and the one he was about to unleash. Because quiet authority was only step 1. The real reckoning would come when he brought the weight of the world to bear on a tiny charter flight and proved that no policy, no personnel, no prejudice could ever override a father's fierce protection. As the Falcon XR-8 banked toward the runway, Cameron steeled himself for what lay ahead. He would need every ounce of composure and resolve to turn this personal defense into a broader call for justice, and to show his daughters that in every corner of the world they belonged. The Falcon XR-8 glided smoothly above the Cascade Range, early afternoon sun casting shifting patterns on the cabin floor. Cameron Carter leaned back, scanning the walnut paneling and supple leather that surrounded him. After his quiet confrontation with Amelia, the cabin's atmosphere felt electric, like a field charged for a storm. He could sense the undercurrent, a readiness in the air. Beside him, Leela and Kiana tapped away on their tablets, faces lit by the bright screens. He'd seen that look before, problem-solving mode. Maya slept lightly in her seat, headphones on, trusting Cameron to steer the family through this turbulence. He closed his eyes for a second, reveling in the calm he'd carved out. But he knew better than to let his guard down. A soft ping on his wrist caught his attention. He glanced at his smartwatch. New message. Sentinel AI. His heart skipped a beat. Sentinel was the internal AI service his company licensed for real-time data analytics and secure messaging. He tapped the screen with a flick of his thumb. Sentinel AI. Audio file uploaded. cabin_lavatory_den denial_1/mp3. Transcription 012-020. Flight attendant. First class lavatory is for adults only. Analysis. In-coast bias detected. Impact score 0.72. He exhaled, surprised by how fast the system had processed it. The message continued. Sentinel AI, please advise next steps or request escalation protocol. Cameron's pulse quickened. That single audio clip, just under 10 seconds, had already triggered the AI's bias detection algorithm. A 0.72 impact score, on a scale where anything above 0.5 warranted regulatory notice. He tapped again to open the file. The crisp, unmistakable tone of Amelia's voice filled his ear, overlaid with a simple text transcript. He glanced over at Lila, whose chest rose and fell in purposeful rhythm. He caught her looking at him, a small, triumphant smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. Kiana sat next to her, earbuds in, scrolling through code on her tablet. Their symmetry reminded him of the chess pieces he sometimes used to walk clients through strategic moves. The twins were coordinated, equally alert, ready. "You two," he said, voice low enough that only they could hear. "Did you?" Leela raised her hand, her eyes sparkling. "We recorded Amelia's first refusal, Dad, and sent it to Sentinel. You told us to show evidence if anything else happened." Cameron felt a surge of pride mixed with protectiveness. His daughters weren't just witnesses. They were participants in this fight. They'd taken his principle of never accept injustice and applied it themselves. He swallowed. "Excellent job," he said, his tone soft but firm. "That's exactly why I chose Sentinel for our platform." He opened the escalation protocol menu on his watch. Flag to aviation regulators. Notify charter company compliance. Draft public statement. Continue monitoring. He paused, eyes flicking down the list. Each option carried weight, but he knew the immediate next step. He had to shore up his daughter's confidence and maintain control of the situation. He tapped option 4, continue monitoring, and slid the watch back onto his wrist. Maya stirred, peeling off her headphones. "Everything okay?" she asked, voice gentle. He nodded and slid the watch away. "Everything's under control." The AI flagged the audio. "We have a record." Maya's eyes softened with relief. She turned to the twins. "That's amazing, girls," she smiled at them, eyes glistening. "You did that yourselves?" They both nodded. Leela closed her tablet with a decisive click. Kiana slid her stylus into its holder. The moment felt profound. An unspoken trust had passed between parent and child, a shared mission. Cameron turned back to the aisle, where Amelia was clearing dishes. He met her eyes briefly. There was no hatred there, only the calm recognition of power shifting. He felt the cabin hold its breath. That unspoken exchange was a testament. He had the world's most advanced AI fueling his fight for justice. The cabin door to the cockpit remained sealed, but Cameron sensed the pilot wouldn't mind if he reached out later. For now, he focused on his daughters. They were learning that technology, when wielded responsibly, could be a shield and a sword. And that was a lesson he would carry far beyond this flight. A soft chime marked another update. Sentinel AI, additional patterns of bias detected from Amelia's subsequent interactions. Recommend Level 2 escalation. He glanced at the notification but let it go unacknowledged for the moment. The twins had their eyes on him, waiting. He gave Maya a quick nod, then faced the girls squarely. "All right," he said quietly. "Good work. Let's stay sharp. We'll let them know that every word gets recorded, and that means something." Lila grinned, and Kiana flashed a proud smile. They turned back to the window, peering down at the rugged terrain below. The mountains rolled out like a patchwork quilt of forest and river. From up here, the world looked peaceful, controlled, until you knew the story beneath the surface. Cameron settled back down, crossing his arms over his chest. His pulse still thrummed, but his mind sharpened. He thought of Jordan's text, the IPO rehearsal, the investor decks filled with growth projections and roadmaps. All of that had its place. It would wait, because right now, the children had seized the initiative, and he would build on their momentum. The AI had spoken, bias detected. Now he would execute the next move, weaving technology, strategy, and authority into a single, unbreakable narrative. Above them, the jet soared toward Seattle, carrying a family bound by blood and principle. Below, a storm of accountability was gathering on the horizon, silent, invisible, unstoppable. And when it broke, it would wash through boardrooms and regulators alike, proving that even at 30,000 feet, justice would not be denied. Cameron Carter pressed his palm against the cool leather of the armrest, staring at the real-time dashboard glowing on his smartwatch. The Falcon XR-8's cabin was quiet now, his daughters absorbed in animated coding tutorials, Maya drafting an email to their Seattle hosts, but his mind was racing. Sentinel AI had flagged Amelia's initial refusal, but it hadn't stopped there. A soft chime on his watch announced the next alert. Sentinel AI, 17 additional in-flight audio clips detected. Automated bias analysis indicates repeated discriminatory language by flight attendant Amelia W. Impact score range 0.6, no 0.85. Recommended level 3 escalation, immediate regulatory notification. Cameron exhaled slowly, heart pounding with a mix of disbelief and grim satisfaction. 17. It wasn't just a one-off mistake or a misapplied rule. It was a pattern, an embedded attitude that ran deeper than any one policy could address. He looked across the aisle at Amelia, who was bent over a service cart, oblivious to the scrutiny she was under. Marcus Chen, the fellow flight attendant who had shown genuine warmth to his daughters, hovered nearby. That contrast made the truth even more pointed. Amelia's conduct wasn't an accident. It was consistent and conscious. His chest tightened. He'd always believed in data. Cold, hard numbers that told the story beneath the surface. In a boardroom, spreadsheets could reveal underperforming sectors or market vulnerabilities. But here, at 30,000 feet, data was exposing prejudice, and he knew what that meant. This was no longer a private family battle. It was about accountability. He tapped the escalation protocol again. Level 3 escalation. Notify FAA Civil Rights Office. We submit anonymized report to Department of Transportation. Alert Zenith AI's legal team for potential public disclosure. He paused on the first option, then swiped to confirm. Within seconds, a secure packet zipped through encrypted channels to the FAA's bias reporting division. He felt a slight tremor of adrenaline. He was effectively issuing a formal complaint while still airborne. Maya leaned over, catching his eye. "Jordan? Texting again?" she whispered, nodding at his wrist. He shook his head. "This is bigger than our roadshow," he murmured. "It's about every passenger who's ever been told they don't belong." He tapped the second notification. Department of Transportation. The packet left. He swallowed another breath, feeling a shift in his chest. This was righteous anger, refined by purpose. Behind him, Lila slipped her tablet into her backpack and straightened her posture. Kiana closed her eyes, taking a slow, steadying breath. They'd witnessed each step, the initial denial, the discreet evidence gathering, the AI's silent analysis. Now they saw the crescendo, that revelation that discriminatory actions were systematic, not isolated. Cameron caught their eyes and offered a small, reassuring smile, part apology for dragging them into this, part pride. The girls nodded, understanding that their father wasn't just protecting them, he was protecting everyone who traveled. Amelia's next pass down the aisle felt different. She placed bottled water before Cameron, hands trembling slightly, a stark contrast to her earlier composure. Cameron met her gaze for a moment. No anger, only a calm acknowledgement that lines had been crossed. She looked away quickly, cheeks paling. The rest of the cabin watched the exchange silently. Whispers had begun to ripple. The businessman in 1D checking his phone, the couple in 2B leaning in to talk under their breaths. The luxury of this private flight felt tarnished by the specter of wrongdoing. Cameron's watch chimed once more. Sentinel AI. Chronological report compiled. Total clips, 18. Suggested public statement draft, available. He tapped to open the draft. The text appeared, all businesslike, until it hit harder truths. On behalf of my family and in service of all passengers, I have documented repeated discriminatory behavior by a flight attendant on this charter service. A full report has been submitted to the Federal Aviation Administration and Department of Transportation. We expect swift action to uphold the dignity of every traveler. He closed the document. A public statement would come later. He still needed time to brief his legal team and coordinate with Zenith AI's PR. For now, the formal notifications were enough. Maya reached up to touch his arm. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. He turned to her, voice measured. "I am. It's the first time I've used Sentinel like this. But it's exactly why I helped build it. Data doesn't lie." He paused to let that sink in. "They'll have to investigate." A few moments passed in silence, each passenger lost in their own thoughts. Then, the businessman in 1D cleared his throat and offered a supportive nod to Cameron. That simple gesture felt like a validation of everything he'd done. Justice wasn't just criminal investigations or news headlines. It was seeing others recognize wrongdoing and stand with him, even in that small cabin. Lila and Kiana moved closer, leaning in to hear the soft hum of his next steps. They knew a bigger move was coming. The ground call, the IPO halt. But this was the turning point, the moment evidence became undeniable, a digital mirror reflecting prejudice back on the perpetrator. Cameron stood once more, crossing his arms before him. He addressed the cabin in a calm, commanding tone. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We've encountered an issue that impacts all passengers, not just my family. Rest assured it's being handled at the highest levels. If you have any concerns, I encourage you to let me know directly." He didn't need to name the agencies. Everyone knew what highest levels meant. A few polite claps followed, more from relief than applause. As he sank back into his seat, he exhaled deeply, feeling the weight lift slightly. The data was out, the notifications sent, and the world beyond this cabin would be forced to listen. He looked at his daughters. Quiet, poised, empowered, and felt a swell of emotion that wasn't anger anymore, but steadfast resolve. The Falcon XR-8 turned toward the Pacific Northwest's rugged coastline. Below, forests and rivers stretched like veins through emerald hills. But Cameron knew the real map to chart wasn't on the ground. It was in the corridors of power he'd just alerted. He tapped his watch one last time, canceling the draft public statement. That move would wait until they landed safely. For now, the biggest disclosure was already in motion, traveling through secure lines to the FAA and DOT. A digital declaration that no one, anywhere, could deny his daughters, or any passenger, their basic dignity. Above them, the jet sailed on. Inside, a quiet revolution was underway. Pattern uncovered, truth revealed, and a storm of accountability gathering momentum, ready to break the next time Cameron made that decisive call. The Falcon XR-8 hummed gently as it cruised above the Cascade foothills. Cameron Carter leaned back in his seat, watching the mottled green carpet of trees stretch below. For a moment, he let himself breathe. His daughter's dignity had been defended twice already, and Sentinel AI was diligently gathering every piece of evidence. He imagined the sea of data flowing into secure channels, waiting to be unleashed on the regulator. But peace was fleeting. A soft cough from Amelia at the galley drew his attention. She paused mid-service, eyes flicking toward the twin girls. In that look lay her lingering conviction. These two didn't belong in first class. The old policy, excuse, may have bent once, but it had not broken. Moments later, Lila raised her hand in a practiced gesture. "Dad," she said, voice low and earnest, "I really need to go again." He glanced at his watch. Nearly 2 hours into the flight, the sign above their seats had long since flicked off. "Of course," Cameron replied. His voice was calm, encouraging. "Go ahead." Lila hopped out of her seat, rushing toward the aisle. Kiana gave her a quick thumbs up, then stood herself. They filed forward, backs straight, heads held high. Amelia stepped forward and placed a gloved hand against the restroom door. "I'm sorry," she began, the same rehearsed calm in her voice. "But the first-class lavatory is still for adults only." Lila froze, a step away from the threshold. Her eyes welled up. "But I used it before," she stammered. Amelia's posture tightened. "That was a misunderstanding. The rule still applies." A knot formed in Cameron's stomach. He rose before Lila could speak again. Maya rose too, but Cameron was already moving down the aisle with measured purpose. Each step a drumbeat of resolve. "Kiana," Maya whispered, placing a comforting hand on her daughter's shoulder. Kiana's lower lip quivered. Tears glinted in her eyes. "Excuse me," Cameron said, voice low but carrying. "My daughter is a paid passenger in first class. I expect her to be treated as such." Amelia's jaw clenched. She glanced toward the cockpit door, presumably seeking moral support that didn't come. Cameron saw her take a sharp breath, and for a fraction of a second, her professional mask slipped. But she pressed on. "Sir, company policy—" "That's enough," Cameron interrupted, tone steely. He looked directly at Lila. "Go on," he said quietly. Lila's shoulders drooped slightly, but she edged past Amelia and disappeared behind the door. The latch clicked softly. Inside, Kiona watched from the threshold, tears rolling freely now. She whispered a quiet apology to her sister before darting back to her seat, cheeks stained. Cameron felt a surge of protective fury. He closed the restroom door and turned on Amelia in a swift, controlled movement. "You've now denied my daughter's access twice," he said. "And you offered no apology, no courtesy, no explanation except more excuses. That's discrimination." His voice carried weight. Hushed whispers rippled through the cabin. The businessman in 1D snapped his magazine shut. The couple in 2A exchanged troubled glances. Amelia's colleague, Marcus Chen, hovered nearby, doubt etched on his face. Cameron ignored the murmurs. He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. A few taps later, he looked up, eyes never leaving Amelia. "I'm submitting these recordings to the FAA and the Department of Transportation," he said. "You're welcome to review them once they receive my report." Maya padded softly after Lila, gathering her in a gentle embrace. "Sweetheart," she murmured, "you did nothing wrong." Kiona sniffed and nodded, pressing her face into her mother's shoulder. Cameron felt a lump in his throat, not for himself, but for his girls, forced to confront prejudice at 10 years old. Amelia's face went pale. She took a step back, gaze flicking toward Marcus. He looked away, conflicted. Cameron didn't give Amelia another moment. He tapped his watch, 2 quick beeps, and a new Sentinel AI alert popped up. Sentinel AI, confirmed repeated bias, level 4 escalation, immediate public disclosure recommended. He tucked the watch down. "That's enough," he said, voice low and final. "We won't need further misunderstandings." He turned and walked back to his seat, seatbelt sign flickering overhead. The cabin fell silent. Even the roar of the engines seemed to dim in the intensity of the moment. Once seated, Cameron reached across and took Lila's hand, then Kiana's. "I'm so sorry, babies," he whispered. "No one has the right to tell you where you belong, ever." They clung to him, tears still damp on their cheeks, but something in their posture shifted. Anger, pride, a spark of defiance. Cameron squeezed both hands. He would not let this moment pass unnoticed. Above, the Falcon XR-8 sliced through the sky, but in this small private cabin, a reckoning was underway. Cameron looked at Amelia one last time. She avoided his gaze, shoulders slumped slightly. "Thank you, Dad," Lila said between sobs, voice thick but determined. "Thank you for standing up for us." Maya joined in, pressing a gentle kiss against Kiana's hair. "We're together," she said softly. Cameron inhaled, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had one more move before landing. One decisive call that would ensure justice not just for his daughters, but for every passenger who might face the same indignity. As the jet banked toward Seattle, he pressed his thumb to his phone screen. The final domino was about to fall, and this time there would be no denials. Only accountability. The seatbelt sign blinked on as the Falcon XR-8 began its initial descent toward Seattle-Tacoma International. The cabin's hush deepened, punctuated only by the soft hum of the engines and the steady, measured breaths of Cameron Carter. He glanced at his daughters, Lila's small hand in Maya's, Kiana's eyes fixed on the window. Their faces, streaked with tears moments ago, were now set with a fierce calm. Cameron's chest tightened with both pride and resolve. He had watched Amelia deny his daughters twice. He had gathered incontrovertible evidence, escalated it discreetly through Sentinel AI, and alerted federal regulators. But the moment of true leverage, the one call that would change everything, had arrived. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew his smartphone. The familiar dark screen lit up with a message draft. To Jordan, COO. Ground all Seattle Roadshow meetings, effective immediately. IPO launch delayed until further notice. He paused, picturing the sprawling, glass-walled boardroom at Zenith AI the message would land in. Investors, underwriters, analysts, each would scramble to decipher his terse directive. A $1 billion 0-cents IPO was the culmination of years of work. Delaying it was a move no CEO made lightly. But nothing was more important than his daughter's dignity. Cameron tapped send. The message whooshed off and a confirmation popped up. Within seconds, replies pinged in. Jordan, understood, communicating to board now. Ending press release. IPO roadshow suspension. Mark, reviewing investor communications, will call in 5. Cameron slid the phone into his pocket. A rush of adrenaline surged through him, part exhilaration, part solemn gravity. This wasn't a stunt. It was a deliberate dismantling of privilege that had been wielded against his children. He caught Maya's eye and nodded once. She exhaled, her shoulders relaxing. "You did it," she whispered. "They'll stop." He offered a small, wry smile. "They will, but it doesn't end there." He tapped the side of his smartwatch, bringing up the next Sentinel alert. Sentinel AI, regulatory packets delivered to FA Civil Rights Office and DOT. Confirmation receipts received. A dual strike, a business maneuver, and a regulatory hammer would reverberate far beyond this cabin. Investors would wake to an unexpected halt. Regulators would open formal inquiries, and charter executives would scramble to contain the fallout. Lila and Kiana watched him with wide eyes. Cameron reached over and patted each shoulder. "Girls," he said softly, "you stood up for yourselves. Now I've got your back." Lila nodded, her braids swinging. "Thank you, Dad." Kiana added, "We knew you would." He felt his chest swell. In that moment, he was both father and CEO, protector and strategist. He turned to Amelia as she wheeled her cart past, offering bottled water to a business traveler in 1D. Their eyes met. She saw the calm authority behind his smile and understood she had crossed an unspoken line. "Amelia?" Cameron called gently. She paused, gloved hand on the cart. She looked apologetic, uncertain. "Mr. Carter? I want to thank you," he said, voice even. She blinked, surprised, "For showing me exactly why change is needed." Her face went pale. She nodded, unable to speak. Cameron turned away, closing the exchange quietly. Maya folded her hands in her lap. That was graceful. He exhaled, letting the tension slip from his shoulders. "Grace is important," he said, "but so is consequence." Above them, clouds parted to reveal the deep blue of Puget Sound. The city of Seattle shimmered in the distance, bridges and ferries visible through the haze. Soon they would land, and the real work would continue. Press statements, interviews, policy changes. But for now, they were a family intact. His daughters no longer afraid, his wife reassured, and Cameron's own sense of purpose sharpened. A final ping on his watch displayed results from the stock markets. Zenith AI shares, pre-market trading halted, pending roadshow suspension announcement. He allowed himself a nod of satisfaction. Investors were waking, analysts would speculate, and the narrative would be uncontrollable. A CEO who put his family's dignity above a billion-dollar launch. Lila leaned forward, eyes bright. "Is that our stock?" He chuckled softly. "Yes, sweetheart. But right now, your story matters more than any share price." Kiana tucked a loose braid behind her ear. "People are going to talk about us." "They already are," Cameron replied, "and that's okay. Because sometimes you need a moment in the spotlight to shine truth on injustice." Maya rested her head lightly against his shoulder. "You taught them well." He kissed the top of her head. "We taught each other." As the Falcon XR-8 descended through wisps of cloud, Cameron glanced around the cabin one last time. The passengers, once silent spectators, now looked on with respectful curiosity. The charter crew maintained professional distance, but Cameron sensed a new respect in their posture. He buckled his seatbelt, ready for landing. His daughters mirrored him, their expressions resolute. Cameron allowed himself one last breath of calm. The descent would be smooth, but the impact of his decision would echo for miles. Through boardrooms, regulatory halls, and ultimately into the culture of air travel itself. When wheels touched down, he would stand and lead his family off the jet. Then the real roadshow began. A campaign for belonging, equity, and simple human dignity. For his daughters, and for every traveler who deserved to occupy every space they'd paid for. No questions asked. The Falcon XR-8 touched down smoothly on Seattle-Tacoma's runway. Cameron Carter sat back, watching the landing gear retract behind the wing. He felt a familiar knot in his stomach, not from turbulence, but anticipation. What would he find when the cabin door slid open? He stood when the seatbelt sign clicked off, Lila and Kiana mirroring him. Passengers collected belongings quietly, casting him occasional curious glances. From the galley, Amelia and Marcus exchanged tense looks. Cameron offered a brief nod of acknowledgement as he passed. No words were needed. Their silent exchange carried the weight of what had just transpired. Outside, a charter van waited on the tarmac. But the real effects of his power call were in motion far beyond this jet. Cameron's phone buzzed as he made his way down the aisle. Jordan. Board just adjourned meeting. IPO roadshow official hold. Market reaction. Pre-market share price down 12%. Elena. Draft press release reviewed. PR team on standby for distribution in 5 minutes. Mark. Federal regulators confirmed receipt of report. FAA Civil Rights Office opening inquiry. Cameron's pulse quickened. A 12% drop on a $5 billion, 0 cents valuation translated to a $600 million, 0 cents paper loss. A staggering figure. Yet, as painful as that was, Cameron felt only a quiet resolve. He clutched Maya's hand as they stepped onto the tarmac. She squeezed back, understanding the mix of triumph and sacrifice swirling in his gut. As they boarded the van, an airport worker handed him a laminated badge. Charter Ground Crew. Authority contact. It was meant for Amelia, but she had already scurried off to retake her post. The simple card underscored the office Cameron's actions had secured. Not just a passenger privilege, but official oversight. Inside the vehicle, Cameron's phone lit up with notifications from financial news apps. Zenith AI shares plummet 12% after CEO suspends $1.00 B roadshow over lavatory dispute. Breaking. FAA launches civil rights inquiry into private charter service following tech CEO complaint. Investor sentiment shifts as CEO puts family dignity above IPO timeline. He exhaled. He'd known this would hurt the bottom line, but he'd also known that some battles were bigger than profits. Maya rested her head against the window, and Lila and Kiana peered out at the terminal lights. A ripple of murmurs followed them down the jet bridge. Passengers whispered, "That was the CEO," or "He really did it." A businessman recited the headlines under his breath. A flight attendant from another charter service approached discreetly, offering a quiet, "Thank you for what you did. I've seen that happen before." On the tarmac, a press photographer snapped a distant shot of the twin girls in their matching jackets, flanked by their parents. Cameron felt his cheeks flush. He was a private man by nature. Boardroom strategies, investors' trust, technical breakthroughs in AI. Yet here he was, a family tableau becoming tomorrow morning's talking point. The van pulled away and Cameron tapped his phone to open Zenith AI's investor portal. Charts that had climbed steadily now dipped in a sharp V-shape. He scrolled through the comments. Outrage, support, confusion. Some analysts praised his integrity, others questioned his judgment. He spotted one thread in particular from a longtime shareholder. "This is the kind of leadership we need. Putting people before profits." He felt a rare swell of optimism. Integrity, after all, was a currency in its own right, even in the austere world of high finance. He shifted focus to another app, social media. Within minutes, the hashtag #FamilyFirstCO was trending, accompanied by stories of other passengers recounting discriminatory experiences. Maya watched him navigate the screens. "You're checking everything," she said softly. He nodded. "I want to see how far this reaches. It's not just our story, it's the spark for a broader conversation." Lila leaned forward. "Dad, people are saying they're with us." She showed her sister's tablet. Supportive tweets, Facebook posts, a short Vine video with over 1 million views. Kiana pressed her lips together, eyes bright. "That's kind of amazing." Cameron reached back to tousle her hair. "Yes, and it means we did the right thing, even if it hurts right now." They emerged onto the terminal concourse, bright lights and crowds welcoming them back to Seattle's bustle. Reporters clustered near the curb, microphones and cameras trained on the van. Cameron stepped out first, opening the door for Maya and the twins. A flurry of flashbulbs greeted them. He raised a hand in polite greeting, offering a measured smile. "Thank you," he said to the nearest reporter. "I know there's a lot of interest right now. My family and I will be speaking with the FAA and the charter company privately in the coming days." Cameras swiveled as journalists shouted questions. "Mr. Carter, was the roadshow delay worth the impact on shareholders? Can you tell us what prompted the drastic move? How do you respond to critics who say you let your emotions dictate corporate strategy?" Cameron turned to his daughters, picking them both up in a single motion. They giggled, clutching his shoulders. He crouched down so their faces were level. "Kids, say thanks," he prompted softly. They joined voices in a single, crisp refrain. "Thank you." The press corps laughed, and for a moment, the tension eased. Cameron rose, setting them gently on their feet. "Our priority today," he said, "is ensuring this doesn't happen to anyone else. I've already notified the FAA and the Department of Transportation. Now it's time for policy change." He unlocked the back door of the van, ushering his family inside. As they pulled away, the terminal receded, but the impact of his actions stayed in the air. Invisible in news tickers, financial charts, and the quiet nods of fellow travelers. Cameron looked at his daughters in the rearview mirror. Their faces were a blend of exhaustion and pride. He reached back and squeezed their hands. "We started a wave," he said softly, "and it's just beginning." The van merged into traffic, carrying them toward the next phase. Meetings with regulators, draft policies, and the campaign to embed presumption of belonging into every charter agreement. But for now, Cameron allowed himself a moment of calm satisfaction. The ripple effect was real, and it would reshape air travel. One policy at a time. The morning sun glinted off the terminal windows as Cameron Carter and his family re-entered the Falcon XR-8's VIP cabin. This time, not as passengers, but as the center of attention. Behind them, the crew had sealed the front cabin door and cleared the aisle. Cameron felt the familiar buzz of energy that preceded a major announcement. Moments earlier, as they stepped onto the tarmac, word had spread that the charter company's CEO, Evelyn Montgomery, would personally address the situation. Cameron had learned that she'd halted her transit, flown up from the company's Seattle office, and insisted on meeting them before they left the jet. Now, as the family returned to their seats, Lila clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit, Kiana with her arms folded in quiet determination, Evelyn strode down the aisle. She was tall, auburn hair pulled into a severe bun, a tailored gray pantsuit accentuating her presence. Her expression was grave but resolute. Cameron rose, pulling Maya to her feet and guiding his daughters to stand beside him. The cabin fell silent. Even the engines seemed to hush in anticipation. Evelyn paused at the front of the aisle, inhaled, and addressed them in a firm, clear voice. "Mr. Carter, Ms. Carter, and to you, Lila and Kiana, I am truly sorry." Her apology hung in the air, weighty and formal. Cameron noticed Amelia's posture stiffen in the galley doorway, Marcus pressing his lips into a thin line beside her. This was the moment they'd all been waiting for. Evelyn cleared her throat. "I've reviewed the incident twice, and again in full detail. What happened today falls far short of our company's values. We train our crew to ensure every passenger is treated with respect and dignity. That did not happen." She stepped closer, folding her hands. Amelia Wheeler has been placed on indefinite administrative leave, pending our full investigation. Our charter policies are being rewritten to include a zero tolerance for discrimination clause, effective immediately. A murmur ran through the cabin. Cameron felt a fierce relief. Finally, the public acknowledgement and consequence he'd fought for. But he kept his face composed. He knew this apology was only the start. Evelyn continued, "Furthermore, we are offering complimentary first-class flights to you, Captain, and to Ms. Wheeler's future passengers, so they can experience the service they rightfully deserve. We are committed to ongoing cultural sensitivity training for all crew, led by independent consultants. No exceptions." The words, "no exceptions," echoed in Cameron's mind. He glanced at Lila, whose blue eyes brimmed with tears of vindication. Kiana's chin was up, proud and unbowed. Maya's hand found his, and he squeezed. Evelyn took a breath, then looked directly at Cameron. "I understand an apology is not enough. I want you to know this incident has spurred a complete audit of our entire operations. I will personally oversee it, and I will report the outcomes to you and to the FA." With that, she nodded curtly and retreated to the galley. Marcus and Amelia followed, Amelia's shoulders slumped with shame and relief. The cabin remained hushed for a moment longer, then Cameron stepped forward. He held up a hand. "Thank you, Miss Montgomery. I appreciate your taking responsibility, and I appreciate the swift action. But I'd like to make one thing clear. My daughters, and every passenger, deserve this level of accountability without having to spark such a crisis." The cabin's tension softened into understanding. Lila slipped her hand into Cameron's, and Kiana moved to stand between her parents. Cameron resumed, "I will be following up on these changes personally, and I'll expect to see documented progress, month after month, until your company achieves true equity in service." He gave Evelyn a firm nod, then guided his family toward the exit. As they moved past Amelia, Cameron offered her a steady look, one that conveyed both condemnation for her actions and compassion for her potential to change. Amelia's eyes met his briefly, a flicker of gratitude passing between them. Once off the jet, they walked up the stairs onto the tarmac, where a small press pool had gathered. Reporters, cameras, microphones poised. In the bright morning light, Cameron led Lila and Kiana to a makeshift podium he hadn't requested but now seemed appropriate. He turned to face the microphones, heart steady, voice clear. "My family and I appreciate the charter company's response today. We sought more than an apology. We sought justice, and justice was served." Flashes popped. Reporters scribbled notes as he continued. "This is bigger than one flight. It's about ensuring every child, every woman, every man is respected in the air and on the ground. I hope today's accountability is a step toward industry-wide change." He looked over the crowd, the charter CEO in the background, the crew standing off to one side, satisfied passengers hustling to connecting flights. Then he caught his daughter's eyes, proud, reassured. "Thank you," he concluded, "and thank you, Lila and Kiana, for reminding us all what truly matters." They each took his hands and raised them above their heads in small triumphant arcs. Lila grinned. Kiana beamed. The cameras captured the moment, a family united in dignity and strength. As they walked away, Cameron felt a weight lift from his shoulders. The public reckoning had happened. Consequences had been delivered. Now the real work, policy rollout, tracking progress, industry dialogue, would begin. But for now, he allowed himself a moment to savor a hard-won justice, delivered not with noise or anger, but with principled resolve and the unwavering protection of his children. By the time Cameron Carter's family settled into their Seattle hotel suite that evening, the full scope of the day's events had become impossible to ignore. Lila and Kiana flopped onto the plush, cream-colored sofa, their matching navy blazers now replaced by pajamas, yet their eyes still glittered with excitement. Maya collapsed into a wing-back chair, phone in hand, scrolling through the latest headlines. Cameron gazed out the floor-to-ceiling window at the city lights, reflecting on how a single charter flight had sparked a movement. "Dad," Lila began, voice soft but insistent. "Look at this." She handed her tablet to Cameron. On the screen was a social media feed labeled "Family First CEO," brimming with stories. Passengers shared similar experiences, an airline employee posted an apology, and an aviation blogger announced a petition demanding presumption of belonging for all travelers. Kiana scooted closer. "There are thousands of posts. People are tagging their airlines, saying never again." Cameron swallowed a grin. "It's happening." He tapped the screen to see key metrics. More than 150,000 shares and 500,000 unique comments in fewer than 24 hours. A banner ad from a rival airline pledged inclusive service for all. A direct fallout of the petition's reach. Maya set her phone down. "And look," she said, pointing to a business news site. "Zenith AI's stock has rebounded. Despite a 12% dip this morning, shares closed up 8% by market's end." A flicker of relief warmed Cameron's chest. Investors had panicked at first, but they recognized the long-term value of principled leadership. He tapped another link. A 12% jump in customer satisfaction scores for the charter company's aggregate services, published by airlineratings.com as part of an early survey on the fallout. Lila and Kiana exchanged high fives. "That's amazing," Kiana whispered. Cameron squeezed Maya's hand. "Tomorrow, I'll have calls with the airline's board and the FAA. We'll finalize a public report on compliance, and then it's about follow-through." Maya nodded. "They'll hold themselves accountable now because they have to." He crouched to his daughter's level. "Girls, you should know something. Change rarely happens this fast, but when people speak up, they force the world to listen." Lila leaned against his shoulder. "It feels good to be heard." Kiana added, "It feels good to know it matters." Cameron's mind raced through the next steps. Drafting a joint white paper with the charter's CEO, collaborating with the DOT on guidelines, speaking at an aviation summit. But tonight, he wanted his family's victory to feel personal, not procedural. He led them to the dining table where warm chocolate chip cookies and steaming milk waited. "Celebration fuel," he announced with a grin. They laughed and settled in. As they ate, his phone buzzed again. He glanced at the text. "Fat A, Office of Civil Rights. We appreciate your comprehensive report. Expect preliminary findings within 2 weeks." He tapped a quick reply. "Thank you. I look forward to working together." Then another notification. "Charter. Company Board. Policy overhaul approved. Presumption of belonging adopted across all services." Cameron read that line twice. A corporate board had codified his daughter's message into company policy. The principle he'd insisted upon, assuming every passenger belonged, was now enshrined in official procedure. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, feeling a profound mixture of pride and humility. This was more than a family's moment of vindication. It was a turning point for countless travelers who would never face the same indignity again. Maya gave him a knowing look. "You did it." He shrugged, trying to seem modest. "We did it." They finished their cookies in comfortable silence. Afterward, Cameron tucked the girls into their matching twin beds. Lila pressed his hand, smiling sleepily. "Thanks for everything, Dad." Kiana reached up to tug at his collar. "You made the world better today." His heart swelled. He kissed each on the forehead. You both made me do it. Downstairs, Cameron and Maya reviewed talking points on their laptops. They saw news segments queued for the morning, interviews on national networks, panels on equality in travel, discussions about AI's role in documenting bias. Each segment would carry the message forward. Maya leaned over. Your white paper, are you going to include the AI analysis? He nodded. Absolutely. I want to show how technology can empower justice, not replace it. She smiled. That's the future? They closed their computers and stood together by the window again. The city's pulse echoed below. Ferries slipping through Elliott Bay, headlights tracing highways, neon signs flickering. Cameron placed an arm around Maya's waist. Tomorrow, he said softly, we take this to the next level. She rested her head on his shoulder. I know. And as the night wrapped them in calm, Cameron felt the magnitude of what they'd achieved. A policy change, a cultural shift, and a wave of solidarity that would ripple beyond Seattle, into boardrooms, regulatory halls, and every cabin where a passenger walked in, confident they belonged. In the quiet of the suite, a family celebrated a victory that transcended cookie crumbs and market charts. It was a victory for dignity, a triumph of justice, and a testament to what happens when ordinary voices, amplified by integrity and innovation, refuse to be ignored. Tomorrow would bring press conferences and policy rollouts, but for now, Cameron Carter and his daughters drifted toward sleep, knowing they had changed the sky itself into a more welcoming place, one policy at a time. The morning light filtered through gauzy curtains as Cameron Carter stirred in bed. On the nightstand, his phone buzzed with a steady stream of notifications, tweets, direct messages, news alerts. He rolled over and reached for it, squinting at the brightness. I just booked my first-class flight with confidence, thank you, Mr. Carter. My 8-year-old daughter said, now I know I belong in every cabin. As a former flight attendant, I'm so proud to see accountability happen. Cameron set the phone aside and reached for Maya, who lay beside him with a knowing smile. Looks like the wave we sent out yesterday is still rolling, she murmured. He nodded, glancing at the clock. 8:15, I mean. The girls would be waking soon. He thought back to the moment they'd disembarked, the quiet nods of passengers, the heartfelt thanks from a crew member who'd witnessed their ordeal. That memory warmed him. A reminder that justice, once set in motion, had a way of radiating outward. Downstairs, the twins tumbled into the living room, tangled slippers and uncombed hair in perfect synchrony. Lila yawned, "Morning, Dad," and flopped onto the couch next to Kiana, who immediately grabbed the remote and flipped on the news. A morning show clip played on loop, footage of Cameron standing on the tarmac, flanked by his daughters, announcing the charter investigation and policy overhaul. The chyron read, Family Forces Airline Reform. Presumption of belonging, adopted industry-wide. Kiana turned to him, eyes wide. Dad, did you really do all that? He smiled and sat beside them. We did. Remember how we talked about speaking up when something's unfair? Lila bounced on the couch. But did it really help, or was it just a big fuss? Your mom and I saw real change, Cameron said. The airline's board approved the new policy overnight. The FAA opened an official inquiry, and other airlines are taking notice. Kiana frowned thoughtfully. So, people are listening? He nodded. Yes. And now they'll have to live up to that promise, or answer to more than just a customer complaint. Lila leaned her head on his arm. I feel proud. Kiana reached over and squeezed his hand. Me too. Cameron wrapped an arm around both girls. I'm proud of you. You stood up with dignity. That's the real victory. Their mom, Maya, entered with a tray of waffles and fruit. "Breakfast movement makers," she teased, setting the tray down. "Now, tell me everything you remember from yesterday." Over plates of syrupy waffles, the twins recounted interviews with a local reporter, the gentle applause from fellow passengers, and the look on Amelia's face when they first filed the complaint. Cameron and Maya exchanged glances, every detail a testament to how vivid the experience remained in their minds. Later, Cameron retreated to his home office to review the first draft of the accountability report he'd co-author with the charter CEO. The document cataloged the violations, outlined the new presumption of belonging guidelines, and set quarterly compliance reviews with independent auditors. He liked how it read: firm without being punitive, progress without grandstanding. His phone buzzed again. "Thank you, Ms. Carter, for sharing your story. It inspired our entire team to rethink guest interactions." He smiled at the message from a hotel concierge at their next destination. Justice, he thought, had a surprising way of touching lives far beyond the spark that ignited it. By midday, the car arrived to take them to a small community event, a gathering of parents and activists who wanted to thank Cameron and Maya in person. The local library had organized a panel on empowering youth through dignity, and the Carters were the invited guests of honor. Inside the community hall, folding chairs faced a modest stage. A banner overhead read, "Every child belongs, a family's journey to change." As Cameron and Maya took their seats, Lila and Kiana sat on the front row, fidgeting with excitement. A woman from the library staff introduced them, voice brimming with gratitude. "Today we celebrate the Carters for standing up and for showing our children how to claim their dignity." Applause filled the room. Lila and Kiana sat a little taller, their faces glowing. On the panel, Cameron spoke simply. "My daughters taught me that no policy or rule should ever suggest that a child doesn't belong. When they faced discrimination, they reminded me, and through us, the airline, of a basic truth. Every human being deserves respect." A father in the audience raised his hand. "Mr. Carter, how do we teach our kids to stand up like that?" Cameron glanced at Lila and Kiana, who exchanged a secret smile. "Start with empathy," he said. "Help them see others' feelings. Then teach them that using their voice, kindly but firmly, can make the world a little better." Afterward, a line formed of parents wanting photos with the twins. One mother hugged Kiana, tears in her eyes. "My daughter saw your story and said she felt safe again," she whispered. As they posed for pictures, Cameron felt a quiet swell of hope. The chapter wasn't over. It was an ongoing story that families across the country were now writing. Back at the hotel, the family gathered for dinner on the rooftop patio. The sun sank behind the skyline, painting the water in streaks of gold and purple. Lila climbed onto Cameron's lap, and Kiana nestled against Maya. "Dad," Lila said softly, "some nights, I'm scared people will still be mean." Cameron kissed her hair. "I know, but we've shown them they can't get away with it, and we'll keep speaking up, together." Kiana nodded. "We belong everywhere." Maya lifted her glass of lemonade. "To belonging," she toasted. Cameron clinked his glass against theirs. "To belonging, and to the next chapter." They watched as the city lights blinked on. In that moment, Cameron knew their story would continue to echo, in policies, in hearts, and in every cabin door that would now, and forever, open without question. 6 months had passed since the Falcon XR-8's cabin became the unlikely battleground for a family's fight against discrimination. Now, Cameron Carter sat in a gleaming Seattle boardroom, watching the final slides of the Presumption of Belonging policy rollout. The charter company's board members, once hesitant, nodded in unison, signing off on the program that would ensure every passenger's right to dignity. Cameron glanced at the framed photograph on the conference table. Him and his twin daughters, Lila and Kiana, smiling on the tarmac the day of the incident. He tapped it gently, remembering how small they'd looked, embattled but unbowed. Now, they were the architects of change. Outside the window, the busy runway was alive with takeoffs and landings. Each aircraft carried new travelers, unaware of the silent pledge etched into corporate policy. No more second-class passengers in first-class cabins. No more whispered rules to justify prejudice. The industry had shifted. A board member cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, we have confirmation from the SEC and DOT that Zenith AI's findings and our complaint were instrumental in drafting new federal regulations. Presumption of belonging will now be a standard across all commercial and charter flights in the United States. Cameron sat back, exhaling slowly. The victory felt profound and, surprisingly, serene. He'd halted a $1 billion 0-cents IPO roadshow, launched regulatory inquiries, and sparked industry-wide reform. Yet the tight knot of tension that had gripped him that morning over coffee on the Falcon XR8 was gone. In its place was calm confidence. As he stood to address the room, his phone buzzed with a text notification. Zenith AI IPO roadshow resumes next quarter. Investor confidence restored. Share price projected to regain all losses. He smiled, tucking the phone away. Balancing principle and profit had been difficult, but now both were back on track. And for good reason. Integrity, he'd learned, could be a company's greatest asset. Cameron spoke, voice warm and assured. I want to thank each of you for embracing this policy not just as a compliance measure, but as a reflection of who we strive to be. We've shown that standing up for dignity in one cabin can lift an entire culture. Let this be the beginning of a more inclusive sky for everyone. Applause filled the room. As the meeting concluded, Cameron gathered his materials and stepped into the hallway. There, waiting with expectant smiles, were Lila, Kiana, and Maya. The twins wore little pilot's wings, tokens given to them by the charter company's CEO at last month's anniversary event. Maya held 2 steaming lattes on a tray. Congratulations, Daddy, Lila said softly, handing him a latte. You did it. Kiana reached up and hugged his leg. We knew you would. He knelt to their level, sipping the coffee. We did it together, he corrected. He ruffled their hair, inhaling the warm, comforting scent of childhood that had motivated every tough decision he'd made. Maya joined him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders. Look at them, she whispered. They're so proud. Indeed, their eyes shone with purpose. Over the past months, they'd attended school projects on civic duty, spoken at community panels, and even helped draft a children's book titled Everyone Belongs, The Carter Twins' Story. Their experience had become a beacon for others, a narrative about speaking up and building a better world. They made their way out of the building into the bright Seattle afternoon. A banner on the adjacent plaza read, Celebrating Inclusive Skies, where local families gathered for a community festival sponsored by the airline. Colorful balloons danced in the breeze, and children ran about in model airplane wings. Cameron looked at his family and felt a deep contentment. The summit of their journey wasn't a corporate press release or a soaring stock chart. It was this, watching Leela and Kiana skip ahead, hands clasped, confident that they belonged wherever they chose to go. He bent down. How about we take a flight lesson today? He asked. I've arranged for the kids at the flight school to give you a cockpit tour. The twins whooped with excitement. Maya laughed and shook her head. You spoil them, he grinned. They earned it. As they walked toward the waiting flight school bus, Cameron glanced back at the runway, where planes taxied like busy bees, each passenger carrying their own story. He silently vowed to stay vigilant, to remember that dignity required constant guardianship. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of pride that wasn't tinged with anxiety. Change, he realized, was its own reward. The bus pulled away, and Cameron, Maya, and the twins rode toward the small hangar. The future, full of possibility, equity, and belonging, stretched before them like an endless sky, and they would chart their course together, one loving flight at a time.